Reports came out late last night that North Korea had apparently successfully tested a fusion bomb for the first time. But is that actually what happened? We've got the details, or at least what passes for details within 24 hours of that happening. And we're going to analyze that and come up with our own conclusion. Now first, this was put out by a spokesperson of North Korea. They said, if there's no invasion on our sovereignty, we will not use nuclear weapon. Couldn't you have just added the S? Understand that there's translation issues. Just put the S there. This H-bomb test brings us to a higher level of nuclear power. They have now passed 9,000. Again, this information early on in this quote is coming from a North Korean spokesperson. The test took place at 10 a.m. local time. Now, according to the United States Geological Survey, the seismic event occurred at a magnitude of 5.1, although I believe South Korea says it's something like 4.6 to 4.8. And it occurred about 19 kilometers east-northeast of the city listed in that quote, which I'm not going to try to pronounce. Now, we have some historical information about some of the past tests that North Korea has conducted, and there have been a number from 2006 and 2009 and 2012. In the past, North Korea has tested fission weapons, which break large atoms like plutonium into smaller atoms, creating considerable energy. Weapons based on fission typically have a yield of around 10 kilotons, which is far more than conventional weapons, obviously, but nothing compared to the weapons in the arsenal of the United States or Russia or a number of other countries around the world. Fusion weapons, on the other hand, such as hydrogen bombs, use fusion to combine small atoms instead of separating them, such as hydrogen, to create much larger amounts of energy. Weapons employing fusion can have a yield measured in megatons. It can be a couple of megatons, and some of the tests that Russia conducted at one point had weapons well over 100 megatons. And that is many times larger than the weapons that we actually deployed in war in Japan 70 or so years ago. So this would be a massive advance for North Korea if they'd been able to do this. Now, we're going to provide some of the evidence for why they might be exaggerating their capability. But when you heard that they had tested this, were you immediately gripped by terror?
Absolutely not.
No?
I wasn't. I mean, excuse me if I'm underestimating North Korea. I just don't believe that they have the capabilities necessary to develop any kind of bomb.
Oh, you question whether they actually have the fission weapons?
Yeah, I mean, they might. I'm not buying it. Right now, there's an investigation into whether or not this is actually true. North Korea and its dictator are known for, trumping up certain abilities that they have, whether it's military capabilities or, even the leader's golfing capabilities. Everything is trumped up. So I'm inclined to not believe them. However, I'm curious to see what the response would be if there is solid proof or evidence that they do have these types of weapons.
Yeah.
Like, what are we going to do? Are we going to invade North Korea? Are we going to go after them for their nuclear weapons?
I hope not. Yes, if they have the capability, and especially if they have the capability to deploy them over a large area. Now, they'd previously said that they had attained the ability to miniaturize their nuclear weapons, which is necessary to be able to mount them onto missiles, which obviously have a far longer range than most of the planes they would be capable of using, let alone bombs and things like that. Now, they say they can do that. We're going to show you a map a little bit later of where they might be able to deploy weapons if they do actually have them. But we do have a quote from the National Security Council spokesperson to the initial report that a fusion bomb had been tested, saying, "We have consistently made clear that we will not accept it, being North Korea, as a nuclear state. We will continue to protect and defend our allies in the region, including the Republic of Korea," referring there to South Korea, "and we will respond appropriately to any and all North Korean provocations." And there's initial reports showing that China, of course, also extremely uncomfortable about North Korea allegedly having tested a fusion weapon. Now, why is it that we've been saying we kind of doubt this, that they actually have conducted a fusion weapon test? Well, the White House said in response to some of the data that's been trickling in since the test last night that the initial data from its monitoring stations in Asia were not consistent with North Korea's claim that the nuclear test it carried out earlier in the day was in fact its first test of a hydrogen bomb. They said that the seismic wave left by the explosion was smaller than what most experts would expect from the detonation of a true thermonuclear weapon, referring there to the fusion weapon. Some experts said it was possible that the North had increased the yield of a more traditional device, like a fission weapon, using tritium, a technique that has often been used in the 70-year history of nuclear weapons. There they're referring to the concept of boosting a weapon to make it stronger than the fission weapons, but still not nearly as deadly as a fusion weapon. And South Korea, based on the earthquake that was generated by the test, they say that they expect that the weapon that had been tested had the destructive capability of about 6 kilotons, which would be far lower than you'd expect in a fusion weapon, which would generate hundreds of kilotons at the very least, or tens in the case of a failed test. And so, look, obviously North Korea wants to have the weapon. Nobody's doubting that.
Right.
But perhaps even more so than that, they definitely want us to think that they do.
They do, which is interesting because they want us to fear them. And I guess to some extent we should fear them because I don't see North Korea as a rational actor whatsoever. But there are all sorts of irrational actors in the international sphere that have access to nuclear weapons, Pakistan being one of them. And so it's interesting to see the U.S. continue to be the arbiter of who can and cannot have these types of weapons.
Yeah, exactly.
I understand why there should be some fear or some concern if North Korea has these weapons. I don't think that they have the capabilities that they're claiming that they have at this very moment.
Yeah.
But what do we do if a country starts developing nuclear weapons? I mean, we had certain sanctions against Iran, and those sanctions worked, right? And it led to that negotiation. We have no diplomatic ties with North Korea. So if they do decide to continue on with their development and they actually do sometime in my opinion, far future, develop these nuclear capabilities, what are we going to do? We don't have any diplomatic ties to them whatsoever in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, under Bush and under Obama, we had these deals where we provide them with some aid in cash or in food in exchange for them not developing the weapons. And it seems that slowed it down some. I mean, I'm on record as believing that they have the fission weapons. I believe that, which is, look, that's more than capable enough of doing significant harm without the fusion capability. If they were able to deploy one of these into a city in South Korea, which is easily done considering how close together they are, they could kill 250,000, 500,000 people instantaneously. So that's scary enough by itself. And look, they have the capability, again, because of how close they are to South Korea. There have been estimates of how much damage they could do in a few hours using purely conventional weapons. And the deaths that would be done in the first few hours are tens or hundreds of thousands of South Koreans. So they certainly can do damage.
Yes, and I don't doubt that. I don't doubt that. Look, when a story about North Korea developing nuclear weapons comes up, I'm going to be honest with the audience because it's important to be, I don't know what to tell you, right? Like, I don't know what kind of analysis to provide you because we don't know. There's so much we don't know about the country and what they have or haven't developed, right? At the same time, when this story comes up, and it often does, I think of political scholars that I've read from. That sounds so unbearably elitist.
I've read very widely in wood and leather-bound books.
But when it comes to nuclear weapons and countries obtaining them, I think of like Kenneth Waltz, right? Kenneth Waltz is one of my favorite political scholars, and I think he makes a really good point, although there is one issue with his point regarding these nuclear weapons. He says that if every country on this planet had access to nuclear weapons, that would actually lessen the chances of a nuclear war. And
But the flaw, of course.
The flaw is that he considers every country to be a rational actor, and I don't think North Korea is a rational actor.
Yeah, and I mean, you can go even farther and say that people are generally basing this on the situation that existed between the U.S. and the Soviet Union during the Cold War, in that we couldn't afford to use our weapons against them because then they would retaliate with their weapons. But the problem with that is the reason we had that mutually assured destruction is that we didn't have a singular capacity to use nuclear weapons on them that could be taken out by Russian weapons. We had the triad. We had the planes, we had the ground-based missiles, and we had the submarines. So the idea is that if they attacked us, one of those at least will survive.
Right.
But the problem is if Pakistan has nuclear weapons and they have a certain number of bases and they don't have that triad, it's not impossible that India could simply take out their capacity to retaliate. And that's the problem. I like that theory, but in reality it has a couple of flaws.
Of course.
And I don't know exactly what we should do either. I mean, the idea is that long term we try to set the situation such that, similar to with Cuba, once the current regime is ousted or dies of diabetes or whatever, considering his diet, then maybe whoever comes into power will have reason to want to talk with us, and then we can start to dismantle some of their nuclear weapons, and hopefully some of ours as well.
Yeah, and we got a little bit of that with Iran, right? When
Exactly.
Ahmadinejad was no longer in power.